All right, so Micky, I am so happy that you're here, partly because you don't do this very often, do you?
I don't do this at all.
Yeah, well, so...
Just for you and for Endeavor.
Well, we appreciate it very much. I actually know this because I tried to kind of do some research. Micky and I have known each other since 2007, but I realized I got to prep for this. I got to go listen to all his podcasts and like see all his other speeches. There's like almost nothing. Like it's very, very hard to find. So we appreciate you being here. We're going to talk a lot about fintech. We're going to talk a lot about venture capital. We're going to talk about this theme we've had running through the day of the new normal, right, and what it kind of means for the future of this business. But I actually want to start a little bit earlier than that. And I'm going to go back to when you were a kid. You grew up in Venezuela.
Yep.
So your first language is Spanish. And I did hear an incredible story. I think you're 6 years old in this story.
Yes.
And this is how your parents helped you first learn English. So I have a 5-year-old daughter. We're trying to teach her Spanish. I'm considering this strategy. Tell me how your parents first helped you learn English.
They sent me to a camp in Pennsylvania for 8 weeks. They shipped me, and I had only knew yes and no, and they dropped me there. Actually, they dropped me in the airport in Venezuela. And then I had to fly back home afterwards. And I had to figure it out and learn how to speak English there. That's basically how I learned English. So my English is no good still.
Wait a second, you're 6 years old, they just drop you off at the airport and say, here, you're going to Pennsylvania?
Yep. There was a blue-collar Jewish summer camp, so it was like very in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
But hey, I got to meet Hershey Park and King of Prussia, the shopping center, when I was 6.
That's awesome. So growing up in Venezuela, I also heard an incredible story. Actually, this one I think you have told a few times, but it's kind of your early interest in the financial world, and it has to do with losing a tooth and riding to the tooth fairy. Can you tell us about your experience there?
Yes. So I found this out much later in life. I don't remember doing this, but when I turned 35 or something, my mother gave me an album with stuff from when I was a kid growing up, and there was this letter that I wrote to the tooth fairy in 1983 saying that here's my tooth, I don't trust my local currency, I want to get dollars. And this was 30 months before the first devaluation of the Bolivar in 30 years. So I just was wired to understand, I don't know, I just think of stuff differently. So I put it on when I was raising our first fund 12 years ago. That was my credibility to be an investor. I was trying to figure out that I could do that when I was 6 or 10 years old or something, 9 years old.
So I'm curious, you have kids today. When they wrote to the tooth fairy, did they ask for Bitcoin?
So it's funny because I did give Bitcoins to my kids for their tooth. And my oldest, she's now 19, she has double the quantity of Bitcoins than my 16, who has 3 times more than my 14 because it was dollars denominated in Bitcoin and the price appreciated, so they each got less, but they all have their Bitcoins in their wallets.
Wow, those were probably some of the most valuable teeth that any kid had.
Right now they are, yes.
Yeah, incredible. All right, well, we'll fast forward a little bit. You have been an entrepreneur for a long time, I think starting at a very young age. I believe you actually founded and sold your first business, which was a financial brokerage, when you were still a teenager. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? I mean, fast forward from 6 to age 9 to maybe, I don't know, 16, 17. What was Micky like back then?
Middle class, doctors, so no background in any of this. And I think what it was that when you grew up in a country like Venezuela where the whole economy depends on one single input, which is the price of oil, you just understand cycles better. So I was able to understand, it was very easy to understand what happens when oil goes up and what happens when oil goes down. And that was enough of an insight to go figure out how to build a business around it.
So what was that first business that you built?
It was a broker-dealer. It was a broker-dealer to serve capital markets. Back then, it was fixed income, and it was hyperinflation time. It was not hyperinflation, but it was high inflation time. So I found a hack on the banking system, on the way funds flows worked, and I was taking advantage of it. Every single Friday to every single Monday was a double counting on the weekends. And that's how I started. So that was when I was 16.
That's wild. Now, but you had a deal with your parents where they really wanted you to go to college. So you had the entrepreneurial bug, but you still went to college, yes?
Yes, my friends went to college for me. I did go to college, I did graduate, and the day I did, I gave my diploma to 3 friends who basically deserved 90% of the credit.
Because they did all your work while you were building a company?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. And is it in that era that, now we have an amazing mutual friend who's an Endeavor entrepreneur, Wences Casares from Argentina.
Yeah.
Is that when you first met Wences, or where in the story did you guys connect?
We met we're the same age, we were both 23 at the time, and I think he just had raised the seed money for Patagon, and we met with somebody, a friend introduced us, a mutual friend from New York, who's also very close to Endeavor, and he introduced us back then. I went to see him to Buenos Aires. We sort of had a conversation. It did not go well. And then we were leaving, and he says, "Well, you came all the way to see me." And I said, "Yes. You know what? I'll take you out to have a beer tonight." And we went for a beer. We ended up getting into a bar fight, him and I, with some other people. And I saved his ass.
You were on the same side of the fight.
I saved his ass. And we ran away from the bar, and then we looked at each other and said, maybe we can talk about this partnership again. and that's how it started.
All right, well, that's a good way for it to begin.
Yeah.
I'll fast forward a couple of years. I think you and Wences both moved here to the Bay Area in 2007.
Yep.
That's right about when I started at Endeavor, and so I remember meeting you guys. Back then you were building a company called Bling Nation, I think, a payment startup that ultimately failed.
Yep.
But I guess tell us a little bit about the decision to move here when you guys did, and what the motivations were.
I think there was a combination. One, family-wise, we were both having small kids, looking for a place where you can grow families in a safe environment. Venezuela was not being that. He was not going to go back to South America either for a while. The second one was as an entrepreneur, when you're trying to compete and try to be in the best place in the world. This is the major league, so it's like playing in the Championships League for football. So it's just like you had to come here and try. And we both thought we were going to come and do this for a few years and then go back to whatever we wanted to go. And that was a long time ago, so yes.
Yeah. We had a theme in the morning, and we had a breakout session on this idea of founders becoming funders, right? So entrepreneurs actually then becoming kind of venture capitalists and GPs and leading funds. I think kind of famously, after Bling Nation, that was 2007, Wences went on to start more companies. He's very much a serial entrepreneur. But in 2012, you decided to start Ribbit. So talk to us about, I guess, the initial decision. What made you decide to start a venture capital fund?
Because I think what happened is, even though we were lucky with some of the things we did, and people here were part of that, like Vero and you guys at Endeavor, and I'm sure more people that I will see later today, the reality was we were too early. And the real timing just barely was starting in 2010, 2011. And the iPhone was that moment. The mobile phone, the App Store, and unstructured data was the first window where the true vision of everything that we were thinking of doing for 20 years before actually was achievable. And in that journey, during those years, when we started companies, we could never we had great investors and great people that are now friends and people that I still interact with that were investors back then, but their expertise was not understanding the ecosystem. And in this ecosystem, to succeed, you got to understand regulatory, you got to understand compliance, you cannot grow exponentially. There's a lot of lessons. You got to understand capital in a different way. So as the opportunities started to show up more than we've seen in 20 years, combined in a matter of months, I'm like, I think the best thing we can do as an entrepreneur is to become the best partner to this bunch of entrepreneurs. So Ribbit is not a venture fund. or I don't describe it as a venture fund.
Okay.
It's a company. It's a startup, and we happen to be in the business of deploying capital. And we behave like that. We build our own systems. We build product stacks. We build practices. We write opinions to regulators. We teach regulators. We do so much more stuff that is not typical of just an investing fund. That's the way we operate. So I think it's a company, and we behave like one. But people need to put labels to stuff. So.
Fair enough. So your company, Ribbit,
Thank you.
Focuses on financial services, financial innovation, what we call fintech in this world today. Maybe share with the audience a few of the things you believe most deeply, kind of your greatest convictions within this industry of kind of where we are today and where it's going.
Sure. So I saw that you had a fintech event coming up.
It's in Saudi Arabia if you want to come.
Good place. Fintech is dead.
Fintech is dead.
Fintech is dead. The way
Well, there's your quote for the blog post for tomorrow.
Fintech is dead. I think the set of conditions that set up what fintech means, or what has meant for the last decade, those set of conditions are already given. The innovation, there's no more competitive advantage on building a new app. There's no more competitive advantage on unstructured data. There's no more competitive advantage on marketing channels. There's no more competitive advantage on regulatory hacks.
Sure.
There is, but much less.
Yeah.
So I think that trying to keep doing what people did the last 10 years is probably not going to give you the impact that it did the last decade. So the first thing that we had to do was a couple years ago, make that realization and just say, okay, what does it mean? Where is the future? So the way we simplify it, the context is to say the last decade, which is actually the first decade of fintech, as we know it, was a decade to give people access to money. Before then, it was extremely hard to give people or businesses access to money. You had to go to branches, you had to go to do all of these difficult things. The last decade was all about opening the access and making it extremely easy from payment acceptance to wealth management to online insurance to any kind of financial product access. That's done. It's a game that is getting played. You know who are going to be the compounders. You know who are going to be the losers. You have an insight. Somebody will surprise in a new market, but it will not be the same way it happened. This decade, we think it's all about money needs to have context. Money with no context, it will not work. Guess what happens? If you and I have an account at Robinhood, our apps should not be the same. We're different ages, our kids are different ages, our networks are different, the way we invest are different, and yet we have the same app with the same interface. Contextual money is the future. And understanding how that operates, how that changes, it involves a lot of different aspects that are not obvious to people. It's how you use data, it's how you use AI, which I'm pretty sure you heard a lot about it today. It's about how you communicate, it's about your brand, it's about how do you think about AI agents. How does your brand talk to AI agents? Who has the trust about your money? What's the right thing for you? How does it know your identity to know your age and your personality so they can, at a business, how does it know your business? So this decade is all about that. And that's a very different way of investing, which makes you revisit what are the infrastructure that needs to run, because it cannot run on the existing infrastructure rails. It won't work. This is like, I'm sure you heard today a lot about AI, but if in San Francisco alone, the city makes a mandate tomorrow that every single car needs to be electric, no more gas cars can be sold. You know what happens to the electric grid in 1 hour? Shuts down.
Right.
Collapses.
Right.
In California, it collapses. So the same will happen with financial services if you try to add contextual money to the existing financial grid.
So we have to rebuild everything.
I think it's an era of rebuilding and launching, and that's where. So it's not that fintech is it. It's the way what people describe as fintech is definitely not anymore what it is, and that's where it's an interesting decade coming up.
Yeah. Where do you find the founders and the entrepreneurs and the dreamers who are seeing the world that way?
I think you find them all over the world right now. I think India is ahead of any other market right now in the world. They did the financial grid. The financial grid is put in place. The grid is in place to do this. Brazil is on their way. They're building the grid with PIX and DREX and Identity Digital. Like, they're doing all the right stacks to go there, and now the entrepreneurs need to build on top of it. In other countries, the governments are not going to do the grids. The grids will have to be done by private entrepreneurs, with entrepreneurs and different people. And so there's a geo play here, there's an entrepreneur play, there's a market play, and there's just understanding what each market has differently.
I think our team did the homework that you guys at Ribbit over the last decade have invested in founders and entrepreneurs in 10 different countries.
At the least, yeah.
It might be more than that. Can you share one or two stories of backing a team or a company, maybe somewhere that people wouldn't expect for a Silicon Valley headquartered fund?
My God, I got so many. We have backed a team in Africa, in a particular country, where when we met them, they were early, and they were already moving half of the GDP in their system.
Of their country?
Of the country. And now they're moving almost 80% of the GDP of payments through their system. And it's an American guy who went there 7 years ago and started there and built a whole local team, but he happens to grow up here. We've backed a couple of kids who were French, 23-year-olds, that we were their second investment. They had a small seed before us, which told us that when they took that money, they were still in college. But because if investors never asked them if they were studying or not, they kept studying and doing this on the side. And now it's one of the biggest crypto companies in DeFi. Like, it's just like opportunities like that. I would say the most difficult ones is probably going to markets like India at the beginning, just trying to understand the regulation and the aspects of what it takes to win in those markets. But that was a long time ago, and now it feels so long ago because they're all grown up and they're much bigger.
I guess on the theme of crypto, just for a minute, one of the investments I think folks may know you for is investing very early with Brian and the folks at Coinbase. How has that journey with him and that team, I guess, influenced how you think about not crypto as a whole category, but particularly investing in crypto as more of a venture capitalist?
That is probably one of the best teams that you could have ever gotten yourself connected to early, because the class of people that in 2012, 13, 14, 15, when crypto was not fashionable, if you went to that industry to work, it's because you were really passionate. And as people that work with entrepreneurs, as you well know, passion is the first condition of success. And understanding what drives passion is super important. So that particular vintage of early teams has probably become one of the most successful vintage of entrepreneurs that has come out into crypto, just because they had that passion. That was back then. Now, for example, these kids from France, this is the first time that I meet entrepreneurs who study blockchain in college. And they graduated from studying blockchain. That didn't happen, that didn't exist. And these kids went to college in France and for 4 or 5 years studied blockchain and cryptographic chains.
Yeah, that wasn't a choice when I was in college.
Exactly, so what's coming out of this second vintage at that age, I am as excited as the first vintage, just because they are embedded with knowledge that is really hard to understand. This is like going to college and understanding TCP/IP, and then being able to go work on the internet. It is that, and if you missed it by 2 or 3 years, you missed it, unless you were exposed for some other luck reason. So I'm very bullish on crypto for the next decade, just because you're starting to see that first vintage come out and start to build companies.
Super interesting. If we think about being in the business of partnering with founders and partnering with entrepreneurs, certainly we're in a different market today in 2024 than we were in 21 and even 22. What's your view on kind of first of all, I guess, do you believe that venture capital goes in these bigger macro cycles? And if so, what's your view on kind of where are we in this cycle, or what can we expect in the next few months or years?
It's a hard question, so I don't know, to be honest. But there's few things that we consider when we think about this. So in general, in the industry, it's clear that we're in the middle of three big changes. We're in a geopolitical change, which affects regulation, which affects scale and size of potential companies. It's really hard right now to believe that a company can be global, as it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago, just because of how geopolitics is playing a role. Second, there's a big demographic change right now. We're starting to see the people who were born in 2000 starting to enter the force. They grew up with the mobile phone. They grew up with crypto native. They just grew up with other set of factors that will accelerate and just change their behavior completely compared to the millennials. And the third one, you're in the middle of a technological massive shift again. Some people say we're entering the new era post-mobile. I don't know that answer yet. I don't buy that. I think we're still, because we're not going to make that device disappear anytime soon. The new interfaces are probably 5 to 7 years away. I think what we are is in an era where you are automating mobile and automating everything that you can do. And that is powerful, because if you still think how many clicks it takes you, how many minutes it takes you to do anything on your phone or anything on your computer, it's still too much time. We're going to shrink that by 95%. But it will still be in that interface, but it will just shrink. You will not have to go, when you're finished here, you will not have to go to Uber to go check the location and copy-paste the address that you're going, to come back to Uber, to post it, to look at the best car, to choose, to click, to go. It will immediately know that you're finishing, and it knows where you're going. It will have defined the car that you're taking, and it will be ready for you on time by the time you leave. That's a simple example, but you can imagine automation as the AI engine empowers. So I think all of those variables make investing a little bit difficult, because people are saying a lot of different things around what that means, and they're talking about new interfaces and disappearing of some contacts. I just find that we are still visual animals, and I don't know how many of you will ever order food online and not see the picture. So I just don't believe that we're there as humans. So there's that combination of events where we're just trying to think, how do you invest when that happens?
Yeah, interesting. Well, so if you want to live in the future, when you leave here today, just walk outside and your Uber will be waiting for you.
That's a way.
It might not work just yet.
No, but it will work in the next 24 months, is my guess.
Interesting.
Some early examples of that.
Interesting. Micky, I know we were talking before about the fact that you've been recognized on this thing that Forbes magazine does called the Midas List, right, of the best venture capital investors in the world. I'll let you share in a minute your feedback for me about that list. But I wanted to just observe that I think it's very interesting that if you look at the list today, these are the top 100 kind of people in venture capital. About 30% of them are actually investing outside of the United States, and I think that number is going up every single year. In fact, you shared an anecdote, I think last year on the list, Neil Shen, who invests at Sequoia China, became one of the first investors. I think it was the first time ever that somebody from outside the US was ranked #1 in the world. Where was Neil Shen when he learned about that?
We were coincidentally having dinner together in Hong Kong. And somebody tweeted him, And he says, oh my God, I made number 1 on Midas. And then he opened the list and says, oh, and you're number 2. This is last. So we was like, okay, great, whatever. Yeah.
Well, you can write Neil back because this year you're still number 2 and he's number 3, I think. But
it's fine.
But what is your real opinion of this list?
I think it's a vanity metric, to be honest. It doesn't matter. The metric that really matters is, are you a good partner? Are you a good parent? And are you a good friend? And if you measure your life on those metrics and you're number 1 on that list for yourself, that's what matters. These lists there's so many people that did great investments this year, and I don't know why they keep me there in number 2, but it's fine. It is what it is.
Fair enough.
America has this thing that they always have to measure everything. And they need you to, everything is a ranking. Colleges, schools, soccer, college teams, everything is a ranking, and I just find that they gotta come up with more, something like that, and it's fine, whatever.
Well, I think in the professional context, your first one there about being a good partner is certainly something we hear from David at Nubank, from all kinds of founders all over the world, is that you are, and your team, you guys have built a culture of being fantastic partners to founders. Since we have a lot of founders in the room, who maybe don't get to talk to you every single day. I'm curious, for folks in the room, let's say, who are building really fast-growing companies, but who raised a lot of capital in 2021 or 2022, what's your advice to them today about how to think about the capital markets and sort of what's ahead?
It depends on each company, but I would say in general, it is okay to reset your valuations. It is more than okay. Every single entrepreneur that has been successful has had a bad period of time. And actually they make you stronger. And they ground you, and they ground you, and they ground your team, they ground your principles. Understanding how to do that, it is critical. Understanding the why, the how, it's critical. Number 1. Number 2, recognize your mistakes from that era. We all did. I did for sure, had a number of mistakes during that particular set of years. Do postmortems on them, share them with everybody, talk about them, leave them open, don't hide them in the closet, don't be afraid of talking about them, is important. And I think you will get a chance. I think Guillaume is coming tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's a question to ask him. He's definitely has some experiences like that, and we were just checking. We were in London a few weeks ago, and we were talking about it for hours.
Yeah.
And third, just try to control your destiny. For a long, long time, raising capital was the bar of success. Similar to these rankings and stuff. It's how many dollars and what valuation. It doesn't matter. What matters is, can you control your destiny? And entrepreneurs need to focus on that. And whatever it takes to control your destiny is the most important variable. Once you do, the freedom you get to execute, to exercise, to make decisions, to grow, to not grow, to invest, is just different.
Yeah. I think one of the ways we've talked about it within Endeavor is, once you reach the level of having built a large, durable, lasting company where you create your own destiny, literally no one ever asks you, what was your Series B valuation, right? It's not a number that ever matters in the story. I guess a lot of folks in the audience also are LPs, right? They're limited partners in this asset class, and we're very lucky to have them as investors with us. You work with a lot of LPs as well in your company that you've built.
Thank you. Good memory now.
Working on it. I guess what's your advice to LPs who are maybe newer to the asset class of venture about how to approach it, how to think for the long term? And really, I've heard it said several times that, this is less of an asset class and more of an access class. How do LPs actually get access to you guys or sort of the best people in this business?
To really be good at this business, you have to restrain capital. Restrainment is an important component of success. Infinite of anything is not good. The only thing that would be great if we have infinite time, but we don't. We were just talking about that right before with Beto. It's the most finite resource of all. And I think that the reality is that venture is changing, and it will always change because it's venture. That's why it's called venture investing.
Yep.
It has to change. It cannot be keeping the same thing. But at the same time, the curve of innovation, you cannot change it. Humans have a way of accepting accelerations and changes in society that you can fast track it for a while, but it will correct. Fintech got accelerated during COVID, fintech grew 5 years in 18 months because we were all stuck in our homes and everything grew 5x faster. But then it normalizes. It just needs to normalize. And that's what's been happening for the last 2 years until this year, which again, we're back at growth rates. Mm-hmm. So investing is the same thing. The best way is to just have the discipline to choose investors for the right reasons and not for the brands they represent, but understanding who they are as individuals, I think is really important. Second, diversify geographies. I think what is clear about technology is that it's more global than ever, and it's becoming even more and more global. Silicon Valley is right now ahead on AI. It's ahead on research for AI. And if you want to learn about AI and learn about research, there's no better place than to be around a radius of 20 blocks from here and maybe a little bit south of the peninsula. But entrepreneurs who are using this, we're finding them everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Literally. And they're learning extremely fast. And again, it's this generation that already grew up with internet and with computers and with mobile phones. So they will learn much faster. So I will just say, think about geographies, think about sectors, have an opinion, and then just don't go for firms that are in the business of asset management, because that will not perform well in the next, in venture. They will do in other verticals, but not in, it's not, the scale doesn't work yet.
Yeah. I think it's been described that, we see this kind of barbell almost within venture these days where the big funds get bigger and bigger and bigger because they're turning into asset managers. They're playing the AUM game. And where the real returns in venture will continue to be in what I'll describe more as the specialists, right? Doing certain geos, certain sectors, certain theses, certain things. At least that's how we think about it.
I think that will keep happening, but I still think there's great investors who are bigger firms. You'll still find asymmetric returns because they are really good at what they do. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't generalize. I think the performance will come from both.
Okay.
But what I will say is the depth of knowledge, it's getting deeper. It's getting much more specialized. It's really hard to be a good investor in any vertical if you are not deep in it. The era of superficial investing, unless we go into a new era of computer or venture in something different, some new industry, it's not going to be, it's never going to be the same as it was in the past. That's for sure.
Yeah. Micky, you're such a humble guy. Despite your incredible success in this business, I'm curious, since you guys started Ribbit about 12 years ago, what are one or two of the things that you think have been your biggest mistakes or that you really missed or got wrong?
Oh, we got a long list of that. First, I don't think we've been that successful. And the reason for that is because one time a few years ago, we did this exercise where we said, imagine we invested in all the companies that we passed. How would we have done? And yes, we performed much better cherry picking, don't get me wrong, but the whole space did well. We just happened to be at the right time, at the right place, in the right space. And I think that you always have to go back to that, because if you lose that, you lose the edge. And the second thing is, when we started, we had a finite mindset. And over time, we have developed an infinite mindset. And the difference with the infinite mindset is that in this game, you don't win or you don't lose. You are ahead or you're behind. It's a very different mindset. And at the beginning, we were trying to win. And that was not the right mindset. It took us a few years to understand that once that happens, and once you let it go, and once that becomes part of your culture, the difference on how you think about opportunities, on how you think about what to do, on how to, it just changes. So I don't look at mistakes in the same way I used to, because in an infinite mindset, you just went behind. It's okay. And what we have learned about ourselves is that we're better being behind than being ahead. So the few times that people have called us the best investor in the world, or the best fintech, whatever, the best crypto guy, we've always changed our own rules internally to fall behind.
Interesting.
And so I think that's a mindset that you need to do this for a long time, and I think it's a mindset that almost any entrepreneur in any space that really competes as a day one forever, that's another version of it, thinks. So yeah, the mistakes are things that we learn. We've backed wrong entrepreneurs.
As you've shifted, I guess, to that more of an infinite mindset or mentality, does it impact anything about your thesis? Or do you think the thesis with which you started Ribbit really remains the same today?
I think we wrote a mantra that's on our website. We wrote it in May of 2012. We haven't changed a word or a comma to it. And every year we sort of reread it again to make sure, and it's exactly the same. We haven't changed nothing about it. And people on the team have come and said, we should change it. I said, okay, go ahead, draft something and show it to me. And we can't, because it's that part is consistent. That is part of your 10 commandments, your value system, the way you think about the world, the way the world needs to be. What changed a bit was, instead of thinking of performance as the ultimate index, I think that's an output, it's not an input. The input is the number of people that you can impact in the world with better financial products. And if you can do that at scale, the output takes care of itself. Right now, we touch, through our portfolio and the companies that we're very involved, over 700 million people every month with a financial services product. And that number, we want to get it to 2 billion over the next decade. So if we do that and we bring that level of impact to society, returns will take care of themselves.
Yeah. You talked about, we're over time, but I'm going to ask you one or two more questions. You talked about being in London with Guillaume from Checkout a couple weeks ago. I know you made time for us here, and you're going straight to the airport to fly to Mexico City. I mean, this is a crazy, grueling thing to do as a job. Why do you still do this?
I love it. I get energy from it. I get energy from being around entrepreneurs, energy learning, energy understanding, and every time I go to these places, I take a few hours to walk the streets and just see how people live, and how they pay, and how they behave, and what they're buying, and what's on their phones, and we do it as a team. We go spend time in these markets and just walk the streets and eat street food in India, and go into the journey after the street food in India. But
there's no digital solution for that just yet.
No, not yet. I wish there would be one. But I think the why is we love. We use Star Wars as an analogy on our yearly decks to our LPs, like Star Wars, and we always have an episode where we say this year was The Empire Strikes Back, being the incumbents, or The Return of the Jedi, or the new Phantom Menace, and
it's an unexpected theme of the day, because we had an entrepreneur sitting right in your seat this morning who grew up in Tatooine in Tunisia.
So our offsites are called Tatooines.
Okay.
Fun enough, and with that cause, we consider ourselves to be rebels. And when you're a rebel, you're always looking for something to break the status quo, and that's what drives. Innovation is the driver, and rebels need it every day. So that's a why, basically. I just don't see you doing anything else. And if I stayed home, my wife would kill me because I have too much energy.
All right, last one. You did a great job of painting a picture of, what one kind of use case or interface might look like of how we'll call an Uber in a couple of years. Maybe go further into the future. Go 10 years from now or 20 years from now. What do you think the world looks like in terms of what you do professionally? What does it look like for entrepreneurs?
Yeah,
Where do you think we're headed?
I'm really spending a lot of time thinking, I don't know, let's start there.
Sure.
But there's something going on that is bigger than fintech or Silicon Valley or tech, which is, I find that people have an identity to where they live, in the country they belong,
Yeah.
but they're creating a similar identity to almost to a network state, to a network country. And people are starting to belong more to network countries than they are belonging to a physical country. And that is and you're starting to see full countries develop online that have taxation, representation, communications, financial infrastructure, legal infrastructure, and you can be tracking, for example, the meme coins and all these things around memes in society, and you can just mistake it for a joke of the moment. I for sure did for a while. I actually think there are very clear signals that we're moving to network states, and those are tribes getting formed in different ways. And I don't know what's the impact of all of this, but tribalism is a form of society, and people are finding peers, not in your neighbor, not in your city, not in your state, next door, you're finding them online. And I don't know where that ends, but there's something there on the way society is behaving that I'm just trying to think what it means in 10, 20 years.
Yeah, well, we should have a beer and talk more about that one, because somebody asked me a few months ago what I think Endeavor could become in another 10 or 20 years. And I said, I think we're going to be a country.
There you go. Well, you are.
And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, we're a globally distributed trust-based network, but we're forming this tribe of people who believe in the same thing. And for millennia, human beings, their tribes were organized by geography, right, physical proximity, and that is changing. And I don't quite know where it ends, but I totally agree.
I think you could be an example of that, and it wouldn't be surprised that you launch your Endeavor coin one day. And you have your voting systems completely on blockchain, and you have you could see this playing out in the future, and Endeavor entrepreneurs get Endeavor coins, and they can give them to others to join the Endeavor. And that's how this is happening.
Yeah.
So yes.
Okay. Well,
try it.
Just to be clear, we'll raise Fund 5 next year in U.S. dollars. But Fund 10, who knows where we might go. Micky, thank you for doing this. It's a pleasure. We really, really appreciate it. Please.